to the June 9th. I think we're live, yeah. We'll start with approval of the minutes. Are there any comments or issues with the minutes? Motion to adopt the minutes as, if there's no objections, I think I learned this the other night. If there's no objections, motion to approve, to accept the minutes as drafted. All in favor? Opposed? All right, the minutes are in the record. While Lisa is getting set up, I'll just sort of skip, if that's all right, Lisa, and give kind of the feedback from the school board workshop on Thursday. First off, thanks for everyone that helped prep and for those that were in attendance. I think you know, we kind of let them know where we're at, and you know, the roller coaster of going from 4 to 8 to 12 to 2 back kind of at like 8 sub options again, and why we are where we're at. They understood we had new information, and so we, you know, kind of had to go back to the drawing board a bit. The line of my take on like the line of questioning that came out of the board was a lot of concern about long-term costs, long-term, you know, decision making, making sure that as we think about this decision that's in front of us next week, you know, that we're kind of taking the whole picture into account and not just one referendum passing and one, you know, one capital bond, but rather look at the whole picture and what the expense is going to be over the long term. So the other piece that came out, I did ask for some guidance as far as what is the expectation of the SBAC in July and throughout the summer, right? From July to November, right? Are we going to be disbanded on the 23rd once we submit the report, you know, or what? And the feedback on that was, frankly, they need to look at the charge again and probably revise the charge. I believe that the board sent a note over to the town council to start working on updates to the charge. Are we good to go? Am I on? Okay, all right. And so more to follow on that, but just sort of anecdotal feedback was our effort over the summer will be to mostly for communications. So we will probably look for volunteers to kind of stay on from a communications standpoint. It doesn't have to be just the communications committee, but people who are going to be around for the summer, willing and able to kind of continue the communications piece. What Diane and I were just sort of chatting about was in that vein to be aware that regardless of which choice, you know, we go forward with, that communications effort from in an official capacity can't be campaigning. It can just be informational. So we'll continue to put out information throughout the summer, factual information that people will interpret how they see fit, not necessarily to campaign to try to get something passed, right? There's a difference there. So just how we use public money and public efforts for that. So just be aware of that. Larry, Alyssa, Diane, anything I missed or other kind of takeaways from the discussion?
So just you kind of said it, but that step back, you know, between SBAC 1 and SBAC 2, there's been 18 months of wonderful work that's done. Trying taking that big step back and look at everything. But other than that, no.
I think the only other thing I had tried was there was some questions and concerns around construction at the sites that are already active in housing kids during the construction process. So I think that's something we need to try to allay those fears and concerns. And some of that's going to be education also about the phasing of the projects and things, but that came up a few times.
Yeah. Questions on that? Whenever you're ready.
All right.
That was really it from the leadership team. So we'll just kind of jump back to the agenda on where we're at in the process.
Get the box away.
He's getting it.
All right. While we're
minimizing that. This is the agenda. I think everyone's familiar with this. If not, very similar to our other agendas. Welcome approval of meeting minutes. Did we already do that? All right, where we are in the process. So very similar chart we've seen all along. We are right at the right before the supported option. And so once the vote for the supported option is determined, or once you have the vote, you have your recommendation as to what you're going to take to the board, we'll work with you to quickly put that packet together to get over to the board. So this is what it looks like in, I'm just going to minimize that font. So let's see. This is essentially the next couple meetings here. We are on the 9th. This is the meeting before you will be coming together to vote on the preferred option. And then on the 23rd is really a meeting on kind of next steps. And all of this is getting ready for providing a recommendation to the school board on 6/26, which essentially they need that information, I believe, on the 19th, 20th, somewhere around there is what we're trying to get that ready for. So they have time to look at that prior. And then this is just kind of the detail of what's happening at each of these meetings today is really any additional information, the discussions and framework considerations and things like that you guys want to work through. And then last day of school is on the 13th. I'm sure if you have kids, you know that. And then the 16th is the vote where we go down to one option. You provide direction to us so that we can quickly put together the recommended option with any of the detail. And then we'll get back together right before the school board meeting, just to go over what is going to be presented at the school board. It would already be to the school board, but just so you're aware, and next steps. And then we do ask that as many folks that can attend on the 26th to be there to support the recommended option. With that, turns to you.
Okay, thanks. I kind of already did this one, so go next slide.
All right, committee updates.
Comms committee, any updates from you guys?
No, I mean, we had a meeting last week, but it was just basically just trying to get more focused, trying to see where we're gonna go with the next steps and stuff. Just wait for the matching orders. So.
And I know Tom Escher let me know he can't be here today, but is there any from the folks on the site committee, any updates to talk about here? Okay.
We just put in here essentially the summary that we put together and was presented to the school board on the feedback from the survey.
Oh, we did get
Maybe
that.
it's worth saying that the survey summary that the comms folks worked on has been posted to the website and then shared more broadly with the community.
Perfect. All right. Design update. All right, so since our last meeting, there's a lot of questions on some of these renovation options and kind of what would it look like under construction? How are we kind of phasing some of these? So we went back and we looked at two of them in particular, Eight Corners and Pleasant Hill, to look at ways, because first we asked our estimator, did you carry costs to remove the portables? They did not carry costs to relocate the portables. So we said, okay, well, maybe we can think about this in a different way. So we looked at the layout and said, is there a way to where we could keep the portables in their location while the building addition is happening so that the students can stay there? And then once the addition is done, we can move the students out of the portables into the addition and then take the portables away. Makes the phasing a lot cleaner, less disruptive on the site. And I'll walk you through this. It can be kind of confusing. So it might take a couple passes just to kind of walk through what we mean by that, but that's mostly what these updates are. The other updates are, we had mentioned last time that the cost estimates that we presented, we noticed did not carry air conditioning at the ad renos. And so we asked our estimator to put that into the estimate, and those have been put into the estimate. And we have updated the cost estimates to reflect these new layouts. So it's kind of setting the table on this here. So Eight Corners. This is what the Eight Corners ad reno had looked like. You can see in the middle is really the existing building. So this area here is your existing building, and then we had a two-story addition over here. We had a two-story addition over here, and then we had the cafeteria addition here. For those that aren't familiar with Eight Corners, your existing portables, you have some attached to the building right here where that little dot is. And then you have some out here as well. So we said, all right, well, let's think about, can we be more efficient with this addition? In addition to those additions being on top of those portables, we also did not like the length of the hallways. And then you had 1, 2, 3, 4 stairs, 2 elevators in this plan. We said, is there a way that we can, again, be more efficient? So we took the approach of keeping the existing school here and then doing an addition over here and an addition here. By doing the addition over here, and we'll talk about the addition in a second, this is the site plan, just kind of showing the overall footprint of the building, and then the revised site work. What it does is it allows the construction to mostly happen on one side of the site while the portables remain over here. And then once this is built, these students and teachers will relocate into the addition, and these portables will be from the site, and then this addition can happen. This allows us a couple things. One, we only need 2 stairs instead of 4. We only need 1 elevator instead of 2. And it also is a much easier plan to navigate. You'll see that in a second. But what we did is we then concentrated all of the parking over here. This allows us to queue through here and have a longer parent queuing. We're also able to get a fire lane all the way around this building. And then we have the bus drop off here. There's about 80 parking spots in this lot, and there's about 16 over here. So for a total of about 96. It's currently showing that we're not impacting the existing play area. And as we go further in design, all that will get developed and kind of teased out. The addition here relocates the main entry over to this side. So pretty much kind of create a new face, if you will, to the school. And so I'll go to the plan. This is the plan. The existing building is where the dot is kind of circling around right now. Your portables attached are here. Your portables that are kind of in the yard are right here. You have a 2-story addition over here, and you have a 1-story addition here. This allows the kindergarten to be on the first floor here. We have first grade here. So essentially, if you were to come in this main entrance, you have a secure main entry with all your admin and guidance and clinic in this area. We come in, we can go this way. We have some special education spaces and a lot of the allied arts, from library to music and art. And then we have the gym, and then we have in the addition, the cafeteria. And then we have this first floor. So it all circulates around a courtyard. So you have nice connection to the outside. And then this would be the second story. So really the second story is this here. The cafeteria is just a little bit taller space and volumes you're seeing down below. This actually saved us about 1,500 square feet in the layout. You'll see in the overall, the price did go up because of that air conditioning. But it became a much more efficient plan, and it accounted for thinking through the phasing and how we would do this with the portables remaining on site. So the numbers that you see tonight reflect this layout and this site development. And then at Pleasant Hill, we'll show you the option there. The reason we didn't show a new option for Blue Point is because we were building the addition in the back. The portables can stay where they are. We can build that addition. It kind of already worked with the phasing. Pleasant Hill, this was the option that we had shown previously. Essentially, it's the existing school up front. And then we had a connector, and we're building all this in the back. Your existing portables are right here and right here. So essentially this was being built almost right on top of all of the existing portables. So we said, well, what if we think about this a little bit differently? And I apologize, this is probably really confusing. Our amazing civil team was cranking this out very at the 11th hour as we were trying to get all these options done. So what it's trying to show is usually we have like a gray area, so you're not seeing the full footprint of this or the floor plan, but this is the building all in here. So your existing building is right in here. Your additions are back over here. And then similar to the previous layout, you have your bus, you have your parent, and then we have parking up in here. We're able to get a fire lane around. We have a lower grade play area and upper grade. We're showing vegetated buffer around this area as well. It's gonna make a lot more sense on the next slide as to how this works. So this is where you're seeing all these hatches are the existing building. We are having the main entry here. It allows us better views of the site. And then as we come in, we have the addition circulating around here. The idea being that we would build this portion first, where this little dot is going. And then we would take the kids out of the portables and move them over there. And then we would build this second portion here. So it allows us to be able to, when you hear me say swing space, that's what I mean. We'll have the kids somewhere, we'll build a new place, we'll swing them over to that location. So trying to get creative, it just didn't make sense to take portables, relocate them. It's a lot of money to do that. If we can keep them in the existing space and use them as swing space, it's a lot more efficient. And we're not having to move so much on this site. Also, it's a nice sort of circulation, especially we can go around in a circle. It's a lot more efficient for students, staff, janitorial, custodials, everything to be able to go around instead of backing out. So those are the modifications. This one did increase by about 1,300 square feet. So kind of the square footage almost becomes a wash between the two. But it allows us to be able to have that phased approach.
Lisa, what are what's the dotted square outside behind the cafeteria right there? What's that?
I believe you have portables attached to the building, and I could be wrong, but I thought you had one just outside. No.
No, there's just 4 off.
Okay, well then even better.
That little
Oops.
thing.
So we couldn't find anything that showed that, but I wanted to, in case it was
Yeah.
there, make sure. I looked on all the documents, I didn't see it, but
Yeah, there's only 4.
okay,
All-
so they're all right here
Yeah,
then.
they're all in that.
Even better. So we only have to worry about those. We'll have more laydown area for the contractor.
Lisa, would you, I know you explained this to us before, but just for folks' memory and anyone that's listening online, can you just state again why the courtyard layout is more efficient, especially on a small site like Pleasant Hill where space is such a, commodity, and why this is still a better design than having it all more compact?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the original, the way that it was going straight, it's more of, we were looking at what lended itself best to the site. And so with this going straight back the way that it did, when we start to put this on the site, this was actually coming out over here. And this allowed us to kind of swing this way, have more open space to the site. We do have to look at relocating the portables. So it's not like one is more efficient than the other. It was trying to think about how do we phase this to stay away from those portables in that location. It also created less of kind of a pinch point in one of these. This was becoming this kind of long area next to the building that wasn't very inviting. And one of the nice things about a courtyard is we try to make it so that you have views back out to the outside, because it helps. I know as an adult, it helps me navigate where I am when I can connect back out to the outside, understand where I am in relation to that. It definitely helps kids as well be able to understand where they're at in that building as they're circulating.
And I definitely appreciate the time that you all have taken to do this, because even the temporary relocation of portables would be very costly.
Yeah.
And those weren't things that, had been assumed in what we were looking at. So, that's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, especially when we think about the tightness of these footprints to start with, right? It's not like we're on 20 acres of land. We can easily pop something over somewhere else. It's gonna be a tight area, regardless, right?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about this is if they bring this back in here, you can pretty much have the contractor have this back area of the site and the rest is
Yep.
the school.
Right.
So we're trying
Try
to
to
isolate the
isolate,
contractor
right,
during
from
the
the
phases.
students.
Yep.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I like this a lot better. Does this allow us to potentially to maybe put the playground where the portables now are?
Well, the portables are, the building is built on top of this third phase is built on top of where the portables are. To your point, though, you potentially have open space over here
Yeah, that's
to
what I'm,
have play area. We even noticed that we can start to identify even, it's hard to see on this really small screen, but up in this area, can you see my cursor up there?
Mhm.
We identified a future addition spot. So there's potential to even add on in minimal locations, but in locations of this school. But yeah, where that blue box is a little further out, you could have additional, I think green space. I think they have the green space there now at the bottom of the hill. That's
Yeah.
pretty much where that is.
you know, I was just gonna add, like, and if you potentially switch the play area where you have it on the bubble diagram now
Yeah.
to that open space, you can potentially not cut so many trees down.
But potentially, and those are all things we can look at
Yeah,
and
right.
develop these further. We just wanted to note that, we've preserved space between the setback and the play
Yeah.
area. So if you wanted to do a vegetated buffer there, we could.
Yep.
But yeah, to your point, we definitely could look at, and it's all gonna depend on how we have to get to the level of regrading all of this and everything to see how all that works, what ends up happening in that location. But yeah, we found it was a lot more flexible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about how to sell this because this is gonna be I think the most problematic addition.
The
For
one thing
renovation.
I do want to note is this has 56 parking spaces, so we just need to double check that we have enough for staff and things like that. So if we need to expand the parking, we need to look at it, may bleed into where we have that lower play area and that one needs to get moved into the open space or what have you, but that's something we'll have to double check.
One of the pieces that we might consider.
Yeah.
With the idea that you're talking about with the play space being relocated over toward the right.
Yep.
Of the diagram would be, the size of that space, would it be adequate for the number of students we have to use that alone? If we were to move the upper playground area and keep that vegetative, area, and then still maintain the lower playground, I think it would be really less than ideal to have two separated play spaces. Whereas, that requires more supervisory
Supervision,
staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing we liked about it being up there is it's right near the kindergarten. And so the kindergarten right now is right there, and so they can easily get in and out. I know sometimes they have more movement breaks than others perhaps, but it is closer to the younger grades as well, where it is.
The eight corners.
Yeah.
How does parking work during that? Cause I believe if I remember correctly, you would drop that whole left-hand side during the construction process.
Yep. That would be the next level of phasing we would get into. So if you guys decide to go forward with this, then we would have to look at, okay, where would the parking be at that time? But more than likely it would be on the right. You can almost see the existing underlay right here. This parking space is not impacted by the construction over on the left. So you would be at a deficit compared to what you have right now.
So it'd be even less than current.
Well, the left side is really
It's
for
for
visitor
bus.
parking, right, and for parent drop off,
so
pick up. So we would need an interim plan for that. But currently that right side is utilized for all staff parking.
The right or the left.
So if I'm looking at eight corners, the
The
right is
is
the bigger
staff.
parking lot, is
Okay.
all staff. And the left is really for
Mhm.
parents
Okay.
because they have to park to drop their kids.
Yeah.
Walk their kids in,
Yeah.
et cetera,
Yeah.
because of the tightness of the footprint. So that would take some creativity for sure.
Yep.
Lisa, when you go back and look at these
Mhm.
two sites, like just looking at them quick, I don't see much room for snow storage.
I see well, we can look at that and designate areas for that. I will say this is a first pass at getting the parking lot out, but Yeah, I can see
Let's
a
hear, you
couple.
can probably answer that.
I was gonna say, I see a couple areas, you know, kind of along the backside here, but yeah, we definitely need to look at that to make sure we can get it out of there.
We haul snow every year. So it doesn't, I mean,
Todd's not phased by it.
It's expensive, doesn't it?
All right, any other questions on the revised layouts?
I do have one more question
Yeah.
about the area to the right of the newly proposed bubble diagram for Pleasant Hill. Where that section is currently.
This.
It's graded in two different ways, so there's an upper level where we have
Goes
current
down.
gardens and then it goes down.
Yeah.
What's planned with that lower level? Would we still maintain an upper and a lower?
We don't, until we do the grading around this, we won't know, but more than likely, it will be, I would think it would be mostly upper with some sort of swale down in this area. Because we have to build the footprint of the building out this way, all at the same grade. So you probably have a little bit more flat area up in here and then it will go down. But again, we have to look at all the grading. We haven't done that level of design on the site yet.
Okay, it sounds like the lower area might be a bit small.
That would be my guess.
Listen, I heard you say that you know, I mean, this is preliminary, you're still working on a lot of things. I don't want, not to get too granular, but the playground at Eight Corners, as it is now, that's the size it is now.
That one right there is, we just wanted to show the existing one.
Okay.
We can expand it
Okay,
up at the top there.
all right.
The original estimate included modifying that, so we can use that budget to expand that over to the left.
Lisa, what was the amount of savings for these two reasons? I know we reduced some square footage, we reduced portable movement.
It's hard to tell because then we added AC back in.
Well, right, but ostensibly those are two kind of separate.
But I don't think we had budgeted for the cost to move the portables.
Correct. The
Okay.
cost was not in there to move the portables. So you'll see in this, there was more of a savings on this one. There was an add at Pleasant Hill because it was a larger square footage. There was less square footage here. It was a much more straightforward build than the previous one. So I would estimate if we take out this whole idea of AC, you probably saved $1 million to $1.5 million on this one, but you added it over at Pleasant.
Back to Pleasant Hill parking again, I'm trying to understand. So there are two sections for parking, like right now, there are 29 spots at Pleasant Hill.
Yeah.
So almost doubling the parking.
Yeah, we're running
Oh,
56 spaces.
So how many are, is some out back and some out front? What's the breakdown?
So
Right
there's,
now, aren't there 42?
right now, there's, I don't know the exact count right now, but 24 right here and 32 here is the 56 workers are proposing.
Do we need to double that space, do you think, Jerry?
Harry, you counting the parking out back?
Yeah, there are like 6 out back and there are
Go up
23.
there and look on a regular day, there's more like a dozen or 15
About-
out back.
Well, they're about, I mean, I'm just saying official spots, so
Yeah.
there are like 6 official out back.
But none of them are official back there, but they park there anyway.
Well, no, there are actually
Yeah,
6
I know.
spots, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there are 23 out front, so I'm just trying to figure like, is there any savings to space? Do you need, I don't know, Jen, do you need 50, almost double the parking?
There's
Well-
about 36 right now, so you have about 20 more on the spot, on the
You have to
spot.
go by the number of staff you have.
Right, that's why I asked.
At least.
I mean, staff is one thing and also visitor spots is
Right.
another. We almost never can have, we can never have a full school event with parking on site. So we're constantly walking across the highway.
Right. If there's any savings there at all, either the spots.
I mean,
We can definitely look at parking. I think we need to get a clear number on, I know Diane, how.
Yeah, I thought-
staff.
Yeah,
I think
like
if-
one of, yeah, like, so we can, verify staffing on those fully loaded models. But, you know, the other question that I would have would be, what is industry standard for the number of occupants in a building and the number of spaces? right? I would feel more comfortable having that type of conversation than us saying, well, you like 42, you want 24, I like 36. What is the industry standard?
Well, I will go with, I don't know about industry standard, but the Department of Education, when they do a school, I'll use that as the guideline.
Yeah.
An elementary school is one per staff. So that's teachers, that's admin, that's custodial, everyone who's staff in the building, plus 15 visitors.
Plus what, 15?
15 visitors.
Okay.
And I believe on the fully loaded 380, it's kind of close to like, I think we were close to about 100, because there was 70 something staff plus the 50 or
Yeah.
80 something staff and the 15, somewhere in there. And it was, so we're pretty close on the 8 corners one for the
Yep.
380 number, but I have to go back and look at what your
Okay,
staff.
yeah, and I can verify the staff.
Okay, perfect.
There's about 36 to 38 spots. depending on the
Existing,
count
yeah, I
on the
counted
back.
them too. That's about what I got.
And, so adding 18 spots, given the parking on the grass and in the mud out back, I would say that that's a reasonable addition.
Good, all right. Any other questions on these 2 modifications? Okay, a lot of questions have been asked about, well, what does this mean from a construction standpoint? If we did this option, when would we occupy, things like that. So this is not set in stone. This is just kind of a preliminary to let you know if any of these options were to move forward. This is about what you're looking at for construction. So and we did this by quarter. So the way you read this is across the top of the years. In Q4 of 25 is when a November referendum would be. We typically have about 4 full quarters a year to do the design work. Again, depending on which option moves forward, we'll dial that in. This would mean that for ABA, in pretty much any case on any of the options, we'd be bidding in Q1 of 2027. Depending on what the option is essentially when that school will be complete and when it would be ready to occupy. Again, these are approximate, but so the ABA, Ad Reno at 8 Corners, or the new school at 8 Corners. So this would be Blue Point, Pleasant Hill, and 8 Corners would be ready to occupy in fall of 2029. Where it starts to vary a little bit is when we get into ABA 8 Corners at new sites. So that's site 1 and 2. You'll see that the replacement school is ready sooner. We're not working on an existing site. We're not having to phase around occupants and cars and things like that. The contractor has the site. They're going from beginning to end. So you can see that with those, and that's usually anytime you see replacement is when you see kind of that savings in construction duration. And that's a new build on a new site. And then when we get down to Alt V3, you'll see the new school. Again, this is a bigger school, so it's a little bit longer to build. You'll see that it's ready about mid-year in 2029. So the beginning of Q3. And then looking down at Wentworth, Wentworth is probably that addition, if you were to start in Q2 of 27, it'll probably be ready in Q2 of 28. And the middle school option 1 would be ready to occupy in Q2 of 29, and then option 1.2 about end of Q3, beginning of Q4 in 28. Now that's just construction duration. Then you look at, okay, is that the right time of year to open that building and move students in and things like that. But hopefully this is helpful for people to just visualize when we're talking about any of these options about when they would be ready. And then there's all sorts of conversations we can get into later about how we might want to approach these to some. Go sooner because it's a smaller package and we can maybe get it out to the street quicker and maybe have some savings, those types of things. But for big picture conversation, this is essentially how this would work out. All right. So at the last meeting, we had talked about pairing the options in the sites. And then we were trying to figure out how to present this to the school board. And really it is still 2 options. It's just when we start pairing these with sites, we get those bubbles or circles, I'll call them. And so just to kind of think about, it's really 5 locations for ABA, 2 locations for Alt V3. And this was the chart that we had seen last time. For confidentiality, we've numbered the sites instead of naming them. But this is the same chart that everybody saw during executive session last week, and we've just numbered the sites. So again, across the top, you have the school that is being usually replaced first. So 8 corners at site 1, 8 corners at site 2, 8 corners replaced at the existing site, and then 8 corners addition renovation at the existing site, Pleasant Hill at site 3, Pleasant Hill at site 4. Those are all 6 under ABA. So the ABA, for those listening at home, are three K2 schools. Option Alt V3, which is a consolidated K2 school. There are 2 sites that is paired with, and you can see those on the right-hand side. The costs vary depending on what is included in that option, but when you see the prices kind of jumping a lot, it's usually due to the soils or procurement of site in general. At the bottom in that yellow bar is the subtotal prior to any deductions when we presented this last week. And then this is just showing, well, if you took option 1.2 at the middle school, it's about 8.8 million and less than option 1. And then it kind of shows the total down at the bottom here. We went back to our estimators and said, okay, well, we noticed that the addition renovations don't have cooling. We need to put cooling into the base so we can see what that total is. And we also said we noticed that there's no relocation for these portables. So let's look at these options that we just showed and let's adjust the prices. Anything that is highlighted in the yellow color is a price change. You will see that there is an increase in the ad renos, and it is because of that cooling. And this is cooling in the existing building. So we are adding cooling in the existing building and adding cooling in the additions. And then for Pleasant Hill and 8 Corners, this number also includes the adjustments that you saw on those plans. Then you see the totals at the bottom. And then what it would be once we take the 8.8. So really the ones that have changed are everything under ABA. The Alt V3s already had the cooling in them. So those new builds had cooling, which is why you see any of the new builds not changing either. So in the appendix, you'll see I updated all those tables that show, okay, if you want to take different deducts for any of these, what those are and what those totals will be. You'll see if you were to take all the deducts, really the change in the total after taking all the deducts is probably about $1 million plus or minus, depending on the option. And that's really because in the deducts, I put we take the cooling back out, but that $1 million is about the difference for the reconfiguration at Pleasant Hill. So I don't plan on going through the appendix, but please know that at the end of this PowerPoint, all those tables are there. So if you get into discussion block or things like that, you have access to all that information on the deducts. We got the deduct information for the ad reno at 8 Corners, which we didn't have last time. So that number is in the appendix as well. And that is our design update. So I'll pass it back to you for discussion block. You're welcome.
Yeah, I think we're gonna start with the Slido.
Oops. Yeah.
So just to introduce, we thought it would be helpful to kind of get a pulse check, right? So it felt at the last meeting like some people were at a place where, there might be some obvious ones, options on that table to eliminate. Maybe there's not. So we just thought it'd be helpful if we have an opportunity to narrow some down like we did last time, just so unofficial vote, just kind of a pulse check through the Slido. I wanted to do it in two ways. So some of this is based on what we heard back from the board, but essentially this first question asking you to take cost out completely. Don't think about the cost of the projects. I know it's in the back of everybody's minds. It's been in the forefront of everybody's minds, no matter what, but what's the right, in your opinion, which of these options as we look at, do you think is the right long-term solution, right? And then then we'll talk about cost after that. But just for this first one, just what do you think? How are you feeling about the solutions and how they compare against the benchmarks and, likelihood to pass and things like that? Again, without taking the cost into consideration, knowing that cost is a major contributor to the voters, but let's just start with looking at it from that perspective. So I think to do that, you just need to scan the QR code. We'll fill that thing out. Should be quick.
If you don't have a cell phone, you can also go right on, if you have your computer or an iPad or something with you, you can go right to that slido.com and plug in that number and it will allow you to do the same thing.
There's a question online.
Right.
Yes, this is for committee members only, so I'm not sure who has their hand up though.
Right. Can you check the Zoom for me? Sorry. A lot easier for you than me.
If anybody doesn't have a device and needs one, happy to loan mine if folks need to. User.
That's pick one of ours.
No. So. Sorry. I'm like, no.
User is asking.
Public people cannot. Right, and member of the committee could, but if somebody hasn't listed their name. Right, so if it would be Ava or Elizabeth, we thought we're gonna be online.
Elizabeth just
Elizabeth,
got promoted to
okay.
panelist.
But it's not a public poll,
It's not.
it's for. Not everybody say Rachel.
Okay.
Yes.
There it is. Oh, my. Alright.
Okay, I appreciate you checking. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So really kind of picking.
Oh, you.
Yeah.
Yes. Boss.
Give people a few more minutes. I think Charlie's.
I just sent mine in. Yeah, sorry. Are we all ready? I was thinking, I was overthinking that. Sorry.
People still working.
Who's still working on it?
It's
Couple-
just one,
couple
yes,
folks?
got a
Okay.
couple people working. Okay, I don't, no rush, I just wanna make sure everybody.
One time, Jim, you know, so.
No, I'm all set.
Twenty people, anybody else need some more time?
Yeah, buddy.
Want to flip to the results? Okay, I'm just gonna read them out loud because we have to scroll down to see them all. So at the top, we have consolidated K2 school on site 1. We have replace 8 corners on existing 8 corners site. We have 8 corners, add Renault on existing 8 corners site. Then we have replace 8 corners on site 1. And then we have replace Pleasant Hill on site 3. Consolidated K2 on site 2. Replace Pleasant Hill on site 4. Scroll down here and then replace 8 corners on site 2. So that was how the collective group would prioritize them based on option and location. Want to go to the next one?
Yeah.
All right. So this is now thinking about considering all factors. How would you prioritize the options at this time?
So now you're just including cost.
Yep.
Okay.
Can-
Do you need me to?
Yeah, I was
pull
gonna
up
say,
that-
can you throw the cost up so people know?
Yeah, like that table.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, did everyone, all right.
I think might need to be up there.
Wait,
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Lost the slide out.
Oh, yeah, you gotta stay on that.
Okay, never mind, sorry.
Okay.
Bummer.
If you need reminders on the cost, Larry and I have them up, we can yell at you. Yeah,
Here, I got
absolutely.
it here.
It's just for.
I know, I was looking at it too.
We go. There's still one more?
We have one more. Yeah.
Oh, take your time.
That's.
Be able to look at both at the same time.
We could pull them, roll, we'd give it, take us a minute to put them on a slide.
Screen, instead of putting it on a slide, just screenshot one. Open both windows side by side.
Yeah. Yep.
The browser window, right? I don't know how slide.
No, it's embedded in.
It's embedded.
I'm telling him what's working magic on the side. All right, anybody else still working? Okay, so let's see what, if anything changes. Okay, so when accounting for all factors, so this is adding the factor of cost. They are prioritized in this order. 8 Corners ad reno on existing 8 Corners site. Right behind that is replace 8 Corners on existing 8 Corners site. Then consolidated K2 school on site 1, replace 8 Corners on site 1, replace Pleasant Hill on site 3, consolidated K2 school on site 2, replace Pleasant Hill on site 4, and replace 8 Corners on site 2. I'm going to just bear with me a second. I'm going to try and do a snapshot of this. No, just kidding. Let me go back out. Let me just do a screenshot. It's not gonna let me do it. All right, Emily is trying to do a quick screen grab here. Are you pulling the one off of the server? Yeah, let's save it. Folder, see server, okay. We're gonna pull up a slide here. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second and we'll pull them up side by side. Pretty small. So we need to just do like the top 4. Stop. Stop.
Actually, where's all their lots of passport? It's a lot easier if you want to put it half. Yeah. I think on the side. Cost. Simple.
Big day tomorrow.
Yeah.
There it is. Oh, yeah. For sure. Somebody gonna talk it or do it. I don't know. Boy.
So let me get back on here. I'm going to share these. Give me a minute to make it full screen. We cannot read those. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just trim these a little bit.
So while she's trying to get the visual to be helpful, I'll just open it up for discussion. I frankly, right, I'm a little surprised to see consolidated at the top of that list and curious if anyone wants to share thoughts on that.
You were surprised at what, say?
The consolidated, when you control for cost, that there's, so much support for the consolidated school. But it was top of the list. Yeah.
Well, I think, just think, to be honest, I think you've got the consolidated folks who want that, and then there's the multitude of neighborhood options that got split. I suspect that's what happened.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
I think it's easy to talk about the ones that are at the top of the list, but frankly, for this exercise, the intent was really to talk about the ones at the bottom and see if there's some that like are very clear we can cut to just make it easier to make a decision next week. Cause I could certainly share my thoughts on how I voted, and what's at the top, but I think it's more useful to talk about the ones at the bottom. And if there's anything that really jumps out is there's not much support there and we ought to just eliminate them now. It looked like it was 8 corners.
This is, these are the top 4, and then I'll show you the bottom
Okay.
4. So, without cost, you have the consolidation, at number 1. With cost, that one moves to number 3. Without cost, you have replaced 8 corners on the existing 8 corner site. That is, ironically, that stays the same. In number 2, 8 corners add Reno, an existing site is number 3. Before considering cost, that moves to number 1 when considering cost, and then replace 8 corners on site 1 is number 4 in both scenarios. So it's pretty clear the other 4 are the bottom 4, if you will, and these are your top 4 on both.
Then the number next to it, is that the
It's kind of the-
percentage? What is that?
The number first place.
Kind of the weighted
Some kind of weighted average, okay.
average of how it calculates number of people putting that in first versus others.
Okay. So.
Should the order?
It is interesting though, right, that you've got the same
Yeah,
four
you wanna save that? Save that
options
thing, yeah.
that are at the top of the list.
So that.
And so what does that say
Save
about
document
the
or
options at the
backward.
bottom of the list? If they're at the bottom on both lists.
Here, we're gonna put a side-by-side Word document. I think it's gonna be easier up here. Instead of doing the polls, and we'll send the poll to everybody when we're down here, but. Same folder.
Are you putting them side by side?
I'm gonna give you a list.
Yes.
Emily just pulled that out of,
My notes.
yeah, they're just notes.
The bottom 4 then were
Is this your-
8 corners on site 2.
And it
Let's
stayed
go,
the
let's
same
go.
for both options, the order of the last 4.
Pleasant Hill 3, Pleasant Hill 4, and then consolidated 2, right?
Here. Can you maybe see that?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's very good.
Thank you.
And if you can even like, I think you can probably zoom in, right? Make it a little bit bigger.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is that easier to see?
Perfect.
So in the spirit of talking about the things that are on the bottoms, those lists, I might as well talk about the ones that I supported. I spoken with some folks offline and made no secret of the fact that I thought Pleasant Hill was the better candidate for replacement, given its site limitations, given some of the options that we had for potential new sites, including Site 3. The last couple of weeks, as the numbers have come in, it's become clear that those aren't really viable options anymore. They're very cost prohibitive. I think I said at the end of last week, your ideal option might not be at the top of the list when you start thinking in terms of cost and getting this passed. And certainly that was borne out as to my choices. So I think it's getting pretty difficult to justify keeping the Pleasant Hill replacement on this list, just given the numbers.
Other thoughts?
I think site 2 looks undesirable on both lists.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Both lists, both options.
Quiet group tonight.
I don't need to, consolidated one on number one on, reason it's so high, I'm wondering if also, this is the way I think. When I have to do projects in schools or around schools, is the disruption. It can and often does cause. So even in the summer, I mean, I just had a conversation, start the meeting, and if we're doing a project in the summer, it disables the space to be used. So probably the reason I voted for consolidated on one, and I know I don't get a vote, the big picture even in the town, but it's the least disruptive to the academic program as it exists today. And that is a lot. When you look at that construction timeline, which I thought was very helpful, Lisa, you look at that and you understand these children, these little schools are gonna be impacted that entire time. That's a huge disruption. It's the most cost prohibitive one, however, and unfortunately, but that's probably also something to consider when you think about picking your choice, is how disruptive is this gonna be? And can you put a cost on that as citizens who are paying for it?
It's a good point, and it came up on Thursday with the board, right? There will be a cohort of students that start kindergarten in a construction zone and are in construction their entire time that they're in primary schools. Yep.
And I do think like as more information is rolled back in, you know, we've been, you know, very focused on cost, which is great, but I feel like the results of most of our data have shown this could fail for many reasons. And I do think the disruption to students could absolutely be a pinpoint for parents. You know, 3 years to our grown minds does not feel long. 3 years to a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, that's a long time and impacts their growth as a child. So I do think it's important that we think about those construction timelines and those types of impacts, because I absolutely do think it could be a reason why it fails.
I find it really interesting, 5, 3 are the exact same order regardless.
Yes. I did
Yeah.
too.
Me too.
Is there any other thoughts on this? Cause frankly, I'm kind of ready to cut the bottom 4. I mean. Without officially raising a motion, would there be objection to just narrowing our choices and making next week a little bit easier? All right, with that, I'd like to make a motion to eliminate what's the bottom 4 on this list. So it's replace Pleasant Hill on site 3, Consolidated on site 2, Pleasant Hill on site 4, Eight Corners on site 2.
Second.
Any other discussion on this? Yep.
So. You know, all sites, so if we eliminate sites that we own, are we putting ourselves in a bit of a box? Or not?
Well, we're not eliminating sites necessarily. We're eliminating the combination of project option with this, with sites.
Sites.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to, kind of in my head, say if those sites are ones that stay at the top, the ones that stay at the top are sites we don't own. If we don't get them, what difference does it make?
I'm not sure I understand.
There's no guarantee sites we don't own that we'll end up with.
Right, so this motion, if passed, would simply mean that next week we're deciding between a couple of options on site 1 or Eight Corners projects on Eight Corners.
I understand, that's just a comment.
An observation.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All right.
For clarification, did you want to eliminate the bottom 4 or the bottom 5?
4.
I want to keep, replace Eight Corners at site 1, or replace Eight Corners at site 1.
Yeah, so I
We'd be saying 5, 6, 7.
I said four, if you want to talk about five, I did, rather than amend the motion.
Well, you just said, we can only talk about, what we can only talk about eight corners at eight corner site or consolidated.
No,
He said or options.
Site one, so two options,
Or site,
site one, or eight corners on eight corners.
Okay, I just wanna make sure.
Yep, so so my motion was just for the bottom five on this list.
No, bottom 4.
Or, dang it.
You wanna read the option?
Number 5, 6,
Three.
7.
7.
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
So it is leaving 3 options to do something with 8 corners and 1 to do consolidated.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, we'll call the vote. Larry,
Yes.
Leroy,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Tom is absent, Mike,
Yes.
Fred,
Yes.
Paul. Absent, alternate two's absent, Rob,
Yes.
Sue,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Jenna,
Yes.
Bill, absent. Carrie,
Yes.
Charlie's a yes, Alyssa,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes.
Annalee,
Yes.
April,
Yes.
Ava. Absent. Jillian,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
Yes.
so that's motion passes 17-0 with 3 absentees.
Can I ask you a question, Charlie?
Yeah.
Why'd you choose 4, not the bottom 5, since they're all the same? Was it just a matter of splitting the list in half, or just kind of curious?
Yeah, frankly. It was kind of like, all right, let's just get the ball moving, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, 5, 6, and 7, 8 are both are exactly the same.
Actually, 4.
Well, let's go with
Four,
so
five, five,
the
six,
bottom
seven.
are the same, so.
The bottom side.
Yeah, certainly open to talking about 8 corners on site 1 as well. I did not choose it for any particular reason.
When you asked the question, is that what you were?
No, it
getting at as
wasn't, it
well?
was purely clarification, but, yeah, I
Yeah.
think we can talk about it as well.
I think it was easier to get rid of those bottom 4 because it was removing site 2 altogether and it was moving Pleasant Hill altogether, whereas site 1 would still be in the mix regardless if we remove number 4. So I feel like that's still maybe a discussion point.
Yeah.
I also would like some more time to think about which 8 corners option I think is the best. And
That's fair.
so leaving all of the 8 corners options still on an even playing field feels better to me.
I would agree.
Realistically, can we replace 8 corners on that lot and maintain the regular school and portables?
On 8 corners, yeah, that's what she just
Talking about the
showed.
existing, so our thinking on that is if you were to, we showed that one option last time on replacing it, but it would be where the portables are. If you were to do the same thought process as the ad reno we showed, and you build what we showed as the addition, you could build that first, take down the existing school, rebuild that to replace it all in kind.
We still can do that with a 40-foot buffer.
You would be attaching the school at some point. So we can look at that a little deeper just to clarify that we can make all that work.
Sue, I saw you.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about the difference between replacing versus addition and renovation for 8 corners? It's a difference of $9 million. And in a way, on one of those options, you get kind of a brand new school. And the other one, you're getting, like, are we kicking that can down the road? That we eventually would have to deal with aging systems and whatever.
That's a good question. So in general, buildings only have a lifespan, and it depends on how much you put into them over time and everything as to how long they'll last. At some point they do wear out, and you do end up replacing them.
But
It-
like, if you look at Bessie School across the street from here, that was built in 1904 or something like that, and it's, you know, it's continuing to serve, I'm sorry, what's really useful function.
Yeah, for
Yes.
those of us who are new in the last 10 years, what's Bessie School?
It's across the street, it's Bessie
It's retirement
Commons.
living.
The Commons over there. Okay,
That's where I went to school 3-5.
okay, thanks. I'm sorry, just didn't know what we were talking
So
about.
to your point, Sue, it's for different groups. So trying to retrofit that to be continued high school would probably be challenging at the age of that building, just because of all the different requirements and codes and things like that, the way learning is. But I mean, generally you can, with continued maintenance and keep upkeep, and you do replace systems over time, you do replace flooring, finishes, all of that. You can get, 60+ years out of a building. That's, what they say generally when buildings are retired, but it doesn't mean you can't get more life out of them. So to speak specifically about the options that we've kind of presented between new build and ad reno, yes, a new build is just that, it's brand new. So you're resetting the clock on it and that complete infrastructure from, ground zero, everything the clock starts. So your mechanical systems won't need to be probably replaced for, depending on what the system is, 20 to 30 years, those types of things. The structure and everything is up to current code. And the renovations that we're doing, it depends on the different renovations, but a lot of system mechanical is being touched, especially when we're doing the air conditioning. Like 8 Corners, we're using 2 of those existing boilers, and we're adding more for the addition. We'll be doing finishes, we'll be doing refreshes in different areas to get the major renovation. Minor renovation, it's just gonna be finished replacement. So you'll continue to have to do some upkeep, but right now, I mean, in there is, window replacement, AC, all of that, in that fully loaded option.
So in that same vein, how do you phase that? If it's an entirely new construction, not the ad reno, and I'm sorry if it was covered in the bubble diagram, but how do you, I'm assuming it's a phased construction because you can't just take all
In
the
the
corners
rebuild.
kids out for 3 years.
Yep. So the original scheme that we had shown pretty much showed new build, almost where those portables are right now. That would not phase very well. So our thought process was, we almost approach it like we showed the ad reno, and you build the addition, we'll call it, and you're still using the existing school. Once that addition is done, you take down the existing school and rebuild the school in that area. The advantage with a complete new build is you have more control of the layout. You have more flexibility as to how things are done. Right now, we're working with an existing structure as to what we can and cannot put in that space and how that's laid out. So those are the major differences.
Is that disruption timeline protracted at all because you now essentially the other part of the building is a full rebuild as opposed to reno?
Say that one more time.
So the disruption timeline for the construction on the site, is that extended beyond the ad reno duration?
For the
of the
replacement?
Yeah.
It's probably close to the same. I'd have to really look at that in a little bit more detail, but I think we put it in there that it was pretty close to the same. Because of, if you think about with the renovation, we need to take it in different summer increments to do that work. Versus, hey, we're taking over this whole space and we're going, from beginning to end.
Listen.
It sounds like we're gonna, if we do the neighborhood option, you can continue with the neighborhood schools. We're focusing on the 8 Corners at this point, and this may be a conversation, question for Todd / you combo. Kind of one of the questions I keep getting kicked up as I'm talking with community members is, how long until we're just dealing with this with Pleasant Hill or Blue Point? Like we're doing renovations, but are we truly resetting the clock on some of these older buildings and we're just gonna be back here to once again do more, or the extent of our renovations, is it complex enough that we're really bringing that clock up?
I mean, with renovations, you're always bringing the clock up. It's different than starting fresh, but if you think about even in a new build, depending on the systems, some of those systems are gonna last 15, 20, 30 years, so you're going to be replacing systems in a building after that time. Certain systems in a building will only last a certain lifetime. So the major difference is it's easier to insulate a new build. We're not gonna get the same level of insulation on a renovation, just because we're working around existing conditions. Not to say that it won't be good, it's just not gonna be the same. You have, spaces that are what they are size wise. So some of those spaces are probably a little bit on the smaller side than what we would typically put in, but they'll work. So it's the trade-off is the flexibility of starting fresh and then a complete reset of the clock. I would also say unknowns. In renovation, we do get into things that are unknown. So like, we don't know until we open up a wall what might exist there. So there is that risk.
So somebody mentioned to me, I think it was last week, and I don't want to take credit for it because it wasn't my thought, but that to start thinking about this instead of in terms of cost, but rather in terms of value. And so with that in mind, I wondered, do we, Tom, do we have an approximate valuation of the 3 existing properties?
The assessor does put a value, but honestly, I don't know that he spends a whole lot of time on tax exempt properties. So I don't know if that's terribly helpful.
The reason I asked, right, just round numbers, right, you go from 100 and, we'll say option 1.2, 130-ish, if we do something at 8 corners versus 150-ish on a new build. So that's a $20 million, but you're recouping those three assets. And from a value proposition, does the math make sense there that actually you're getting more value by recouping those 3 assets for other town uses at about a $20 million price point?
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation that the community needs to have. If there are vacated buildings, what do we do with them? Do we sell them? Do we repurpose them? We've not even ventured down that road.
Yeah, no, obviously, right, and so those discussions would happen. I'm just pure like property value, if that math makes sense or not. And if you don't know it, that's fair. I put you on the
But I
spot.
would say that the neighborhood schools, I think of Pleasant Hill and Blue Point, in my opinion, it would be tough to think about selling those for highest and best use, kind of top dollar. Given the fact that they're integrated neighborhoods, I think we have a responsibility to identify a buyer and maybe work with that buyer to understand how they want to repurpose that school, just to be good neighbors. That often brings down the sale price. 8 corners probably is in an area where you could, set it loose on the open market and sell it to the highest bidder. But before we even get there, I think there's all kinds of repurposing discussions that would be had first. Consider internal use first.
Well, that's kind of where I was going, right? So if let's, again, like our charge is to stay focused on the school, but just pulling the thread a little bit, right? If you did, down the road, we get a mandate for pre-K, after school programs, whatever, right? There's what, like, these are resources that can be used towards those things rather than in 5 years or 10 years, we're trying to do a referendum to buy land and build a building somewhere to meet those town needs. That's what I'm just trying to figure out, like from a value, perspective. So
I agree with that strongly, that I think that would be part of the equation of choosing to build a new school, consolidated school. I think the challenge would be making kind of a what if against hard dollars, meaning that it would be part of the education progress and bringing the voters along with you to have them understand the value in having those assets for future use, the dollar value.
And then separately from that, I thought, I was just looking for the tax impact calculator. I thought there was a live link somewhere online.
I believe there is.
There is, right? Okay, I'll find it. Just curious what the difference is in that, some of these prices.
Yeah, you should be able to just modify the.
Yeah, I'll
the
find it.
price.
Okay.
It's interesting, the price of the consolidated school really has remained constant. I guess the one add was the additional site costs that we've built in, whereas all the other costs appear to be kind of rising to it. So there's just interesting to see that there's not this huge differential anymore between many of the options.
And that they're all also, right, it's worth saying again, they are all at the top or above the budget that we tried to hit, so. It's not lost on me.
If you go to the webpage, there's a little button up top that says quick links. It's a drop down, and tax calculator is the second one down.
On the building committee site?
No, town site.
You have to be on the town website.
That's why I didn't see it, okay.
Well, it doesn't collect taxes.
Does that model reflect the fact that we have a budget? I mean, we basically have passed another budget year. And so,
The FY 26 budget,
yeah,
yes, I believe it does have that built in. We're presuming that it passes tomorrow, but yes, it did.
As just speaking like in terms of value. I think the consolidated school probably isn't at the top of my list, but we're talking value. I think it's interesting to me, like. It seems very short-sighted. To spend this kind of money and put all these Band-Aids on these schools. Rather than like just start clean. Like I hate to say that because it's not my number one choice, but it's starting to become clear that this brings more value to our community, especially when you're pushing this out like decades, right? I don't know.
Charlie, did we budget any time in the meeting tonight for smaller groups to kind of chew on this a little bit?
Yeah, I mean,
Because it seems like there are people that are choosing to be quiet right now, and I wonder if there might be more discussion if people were meeting in smaller groups and not necessarily speaking to 25 people in the room.
Yeah, we can break up. We've got essentially a half an hour, and I don't think we need, it doesn't sound, I put a placeholder for exec session at the end if we need it, but it doesn't, I don't have a reason for it, and I don't think there is, so we certainly have time. So why don't we do that? Let's
Before we do that, Charlie, I got a question for Lisa. On option 1.2.
middle school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 8.8 million is based upon the numbers we have now. Do you know what the escalator would be if we went out 5 or 6 years?
In general, I would add 4 to 6% per year. For every year you push it out.
So you're talking like 30%.
Yeah.
If you're going out that far.
5 years.
But in the interim, we have time to figure out whether that was a COVID bump that only lasted 2 years and enrollment continues to decline as it has, in spite of increasing town population. So if we build now, it's because we think enrollment will continue to increase. But if we delay the additional classrooms at the middle school, we will have a chance to see what enrollment actually does. And if we knew now that it was only 2 years, we have this bump that is going to be with us for 2 years, would we build an additional
that number of classrooms, the addition, onto the middle school? Or would we try to just make do and get through it?
If we knew that,
Those kids who have already been born, but aren't gonna hit the middle school for 8 years. If we knew it was just those 2 years worth of kids. And then enrollment continues to decline. As it has for the last 10 years.
but it's the student and increases. We fiscally looking at this 8.8 million being
If you wait
10,
years.
10, 11 million in addition. Will the public agree to do that in 5 years? If not, we're right back in a situation with the middle school that we're in now, not enough room.
And think about it too, I mean, you probably would have about 3 years to make that decision, because you would need to get it approved, you'd have to then design it, then you'd have to build it, and then we would be ready if that was not a bubble.
But we
And
just, I
but it's
mean, we
fiscally
kind of
responsible
designed
now
it.
for 8.8 million.
Well, we have a conceptual concept, but you would, that, once we approve the referendum, there's a year of detailed design work.
Right, so
So,
if we were to build it now, or as part of this project, we'll have a little wing of a school that's gonna be pretty much unused, although I'm sure they'll find a way to use it, like, or whatever. But it would basically go unused for 8 years until it's needed.
We brought up a couple of times, and maybe this is for next week, because we're gonna get through what we're doing now and then make these harder decisions next week. But it also, I think, it probably doesn't add up to much, but we wouldn't be financing that money now either, for that addition. And I think that, we've talked about giving that to the voters to decide, where, we'd have the bigger question at the lower dollar amount without the cost of doing the second floor, and then ask a second question: do you approve the second floor? If you go strictly by the survey, it seems like that would pass, because it's, they said overwhelmingly they didn't want any deferments. But I think it would maybe ask that to the voters to make that decision. I do agree with Sue to some degree that as it is right now, we don't know everything, but as it is right now, it's kind of the definition of temporary. That 2-year increase, we don't need it right now, and we might not need it after that goes through. So, maybe you don't spend $10 million at that point, and there's a less expensive option to handle, and it will have better data on if it is a bubble or not. And so that maybe there's a less expensive option than necessarily doing the design second floor, that isn't more expensive.
I don't know that it's temporary, it's just unseen yet.
Just what, so,
Like you had said, it's a temporary thing. We don't actually know if it's temporary or not.
well, that's what I'm saying.
It may be the trajectory, but until we have a few more data.
Well, I'm saying that the data we know today, it is.
Jenna, do you have the year that those kids will start 6th grade? Handy.
They will start.
Thank you.
That year that was like the biggest, or the max for 6 to 8 was in 2034, 2035.
That's helpful, thank you.
Which just a talking point on this, right? Like, so that means if over the course of the next couple of years, right, the trend, we see that it's a trend, not a bubble, right? Then in order to have that wing built by 2033,
They start 2034 school year, September 2034.
34, you'd have to start construction in like
2 years prior to that.
2031. You'd be, so this project would end in 2029. You'd know then, okay, we gotta pass a referendum to, right, to add that in. That's just a risk, right? It just, no opinion associated with that, but that is the risk. Yeah.
I don't mean to put Jenna on the spot here, but you seem to have the numbers out, so. The number of middle schoolers, and we covered this months ago,
Yeah.
so I can go from memory here, but the number of middle schoolers today, if I remember, is mid sixes, low sixes.
For the 2024-25 school year, it was 665.
So, and we're talking about a spike in 2034-25 of over 900, correct?
To 923.
So that's almost a 50% increase. And if we needed those numbers to get back down to today's numbers, that would be what, a 33% or so drop from 2034-35 numbers to get back down to the 600 or so. So I think it helps to kind of put it in those terms and ask if we really have an expectation that the numbers are going to drop by a third after 2034-35. Are they likely to continue on that rocket trajectory? I doubt that, but a 33% drop in our middle school population after 2034-2035, it seems, I don't know what the catalyst is to cause that drop of that significant.
I also think it's helpful to talk about the number of students too, because we're not talking about how to accommodate 15 kids, 100 kids. We're talking about how we're gonna accommodate almost 300 kids. Like, this is not gonna be portables in the Wentworth or middle school parking lot. It's 300 students.
Hey, to put a dollar figure on that, how many classrooms are we envisioning with middle school option one?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay, like 8, maybe?
Well, middle school option 1, you're adding 12 just for the 6th grade.
Okay, so 12 classrooms.
Stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We closed to 24 additional classrooms.
Okay, and then if you had to then provide portables for them because we didn't have enough classrooms for them, how much would that cost?
Right now, 2 classrooms is $1 million at today's cost.
So,
And you can't just buy 2.
yeah, so I guess what my thinking,
We could sit.
My
6
thinking-
million plus or minus.
it seems like it would be to just build option one would save us more money in the long run if we just built it rather than buy portables when we need them. Even if we're never going to achieve that population in the long run.
And I would say even if we're never gonna achieve that, all of these building projects don't add up to the number of classrooms we ideally want for pre-K through 8. So like if you are correct and this is a bubble, then we have some extra classrooms for pre-K. As worst case scenario, we have to readjust some grade levels, but we have the pre-K there as a fallback.
And then it's also important to like think that educational standards change. And so Wentworth is not at max capacity, but there's not a square inch not being used for something. So do we want to just buy a new problem because we got just enough classrooms we needed for 2025 standards and giving no space for.
Well, that
the
is by
future-
definition the Scarborough Middle School problem,
Right.
because Scarborough Middle School was built with the exact population at the time that it was built, and it was undersized from the word go.
Mhm.
So we could repeat history, sure.
The other thing to consider with the addition we're putting on the school, taking where the portables now parking, where do we put the additional portables when it becomes time?
In the perfect world, I mean, of course, let's just keep building it. Let's add, another 12 classrooms, but we are talking reality on whether or not something will pass because it's too expensive. And so we can build for 160 million. We can put that on a referendum and take a chance and see what happens. And then we could very well be right back here next year.
And that's definitely something to consider, absolutely, but we also got survey results that state don't defer. That's the only overwhelmingly consistent thing in our survey was don't defer, don't do this to us again. So we have to find a way to balance that this is a very costly endeavor and also listening to the town of Scarborough when they said, don't defer.
I hear you, but I will maintain that survey, the percentage of people with kids was twice what it is in the population, in the town population right now. And yes, it's the only data we have, but we are faced with, all of these proposals are above what our, target goal was, 70 to 130 million. So we can, let's go for it. If that's what the group wants.
Well, Alyssa, I think that's what I'm saying is the reasoning behind splitting the question.
Yeah.
Is there's a conflict, I think, in that survey between overwhelming support for no deferments and the total costs that people want to spend.
Yeah.
And so by splitting that, you'll flush that out. It seems like if the survey's right and people don't want to defer for a lot of good reasons here, then there's not a risk necessarily of it failing. I mean, there's certainly always a risk, but I think it would have the voters prove that that's the money they want to spend.
That's a very typical process in a lot of communities. They will put what they'll call a base question out that is kind of solving most of the things that you're trying to solve for. And if there's something in question, you break it out into another question and let people weigh in on it. And you'll find out whether they'll support it or not.
I know you've put a lot of thought behind that. We've talked about it for weeks. Interested to hear kind of where you sit on it and if you've talked to lawyers who helped with work or whoever helped with the wording on that stuff.
But it's certainly doable. It takes some very careful wordsmithing, and that base question needs to be something that's actionable and serviceable that can stand on its own. And that secondary question would only apply if question one prevails. So all that can be constructed is simply very carefully worded, and then a lot of education around what we're asking and why. But I think giving power to the people, I mean, if there's one silver lining in those second survey results, is the overwhelming distaste for deferments. And that was the biggest risk of doing this approach, is that they're going to approve the first. We're lucky enough, but human nature is I can't bear to approve both of them. But those results should give you some comfort that I think voters might well support that as well. And if they don't, it's not a great alternative, but you have time to see what happens with the enrollment and time to react. It's not ideal, but it's not gone forever. There's still a chance.
Another way to look at it too is if you get that base question passed, it's at the dollar amount of today. And if the other one needs to be deferred, it's yes, escalated for whenever it happens, but it's a lower dollar amount that you're escalating instead of the whole thing, not, and you're deferring that. It's pretty big escalation.
I think the other benefit is it demonstrates to the voters, one, you've done your work, that you know fully what the needs of this district are, or very well what will be. But also giving the ultimate choice, not the choice to the voters to decide for themselves on those two questions.
I think also one of the challenges that we learned after the referendum last time was that there was a misconception that the referendum price was just to build the consolidated school. Whereas this option, I think, serves as an educational piece too. This is what you're getting for question one. This is what you're getting for question two. Whereas last time we bundled them and people weren't necessarily informed prior to voting what the individual pieces and components were. So I do think that there's an advantage in that way.
Lisa, could you put that summary chart back up, please?
The one with all the options.
Updated one, yes.
Yep.
Please.
Let me make sure I can share it here. I'll make it bigger here in just a second. There we go.
So it seems as though implicit in what was just being discussed is the goal would be to get that base question within the range that we had talked about. And the only one that does that is the Eight Corners addition renovation with option 1.2.
Well, I will say that there's other items that we've listed that you could defer or select, lower the price.
Right.
To your point, the only one that does that on this chart with taking the 8.8 out for 1.2 is Eight Corners at Reno at Eight Corners.
Right, so I just, the premise, as one example, could be, that could be the base question, would be all of it. And then the second part would be the additional amount beyond the option 1.2 for the middle school.
Yeah.
And that would push us over the range that we talked about, but we would have done our work in terms of coming in with the base question that we want to have pass within the range. And then the voters could decide if they want to go beyond that.
Yeah, the secondary question, would you approve an additional 8.8 million to build?
Right.
12 more classrooms? That was unsupported.
Tom, are you allowed to put the tax impact on the actual referendum?
And be careful, but yeah, there's an opportunity for an explanatory note. Yep.
So when I,
Got both ways. It's just, it's an estimate at best, and so I think we ought to be cautious about all of that. But yes, you can put explanatory language on a ballot.
so when I run the tax impact calculator for the $133 million school, and if I have the median house of 600,000, from 2029 through 2036, the tax impact is over $500. It's not 200 or 400. And 2 of those years, it's over $600. So we need to be prepared that if there's a no campaign going on out there, that is going to be a pretty big highlight, the fact that your taxes are going to go up.
What's the 30-year average?
Well, yeah, of course, the 30-year average is, I mean, the final 2 years, it's only $133, but you know, I don't see that here. The 30-year,
Oh, it probably doesn't calculate. Okay.
So can you reverse engineer what you just did to tell us what $400 in those peak years equates to?
Just plug in a fictitious.
well, I have to go back to it can't be 133 million.
No, it
And
has to be
I'm-
110.
I don't have that.
So, yeah, I was gonna
Yeah, we
talk
can
to
do
you
that.
afterwards. I actually
But
downloaded the spreadsheet and tried to change the
Yeah.
base, the total capital bond, and I can't make heads or tails of
okay,
it.
I can certainly model that and tell you what
Yeah.
that magic number is.
And I can do it, but not on this
Yep.
thing.
Sure, sure. I was just curious, if you seemed like you were
I'll do that.
in real time changing things, so that's fine.
The online calculator lets you change your property value, but not the bond amount.
Not the bond, okay.
So we can't, that's what I was trying to do, was play with this of what's the difference in your taxes from 130 to 160.
But you just copy the Google, the spreadsheet and
Yeah,
change the tranches.
yeah.
I'll do that and I'll send it around what that construction number would be to meet, to not exceed 400 in any given year.
I know there was some talk of breaking into smaller groups, and that's really your call, Charlie. I just keep the questions coming because every single thing that we suss out right now is something that we're gonna be informed on for next Monday. Like, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that I would like to see that number, but if we can
Yeah.
have some of that stuff, so if there's other things that are still itching that you would like to know for next Monday, let's try and have those conversations so that we're not sitting here next Monday saying, oh, I wish I knew blah, blah, blah.
My question about if we could put the tax impact on the referendum had to do with actually like increasing the likelihood that that deferment would pass. If the question was for, I know you have to put the dollar amount for the bond, but you know, if this would increase your taxes by $75 a year, would you approve this extra thing? Is a whole lot different than when they're already considering 130 million. I think that would go a long way towards taking some of the risk out of the failure on it.
One of the things I was thinking about and sorry, go ahead, Jenna.
Oh, no, you can.
Well, I would just, I wanted to, at some point, go back to the survey from last fall, spring, whenever we, SBAC one, right, that survey that asked the questions about why the last referendum failed. I can't remember the numbers off top. I remember there being three main reasons, right? There was cost, location,
Losing the neighborhood schools.
and then desire to keep neighborhood schools, right? I don't remember the percentages of that. And as I think about that, in light of these consolidated options, right? Is this different enough, even if the cost was high, to sway those people that didn't like location or, something like that? It's only $10 million less, so I'm gonna guess it's not gonna change the people that were cost conscious, right? But just curious, I will, between now and then, go back to that survey and just kind of take a look at that, but food for thought on whether or not, $150 smaller consolidated, 150 million smaller consolidated school in a different location would get a different referendum vote.
That was another factor, was the overall size of the school, so that's something else that has improved from the people who were objecting to that.
And to
If
your
this was a-
point, go ahead, Tom.
If this was a regular election year,
This
I
is
would
very
agree with you, but we're talking about an off-year election. And history has shown the only people that vote on off year are seniors.
That's a great point.
That's the only catch.
The
I
other,
can't even vote.
the other point that I was just gonna add on to what you were just saying, if we're, it sounds like we're talking about like getting more information about the tax impact, right? Of some of these different decisions. And I just want to make sure that we're putting out there that we had previously demonstrated the tax savings of the consolidated project because of staffing. So if you were gonna model that up, Tom, is it possible for you to, show that, we have 4 options left, right? And so if you are able to show the tax impact of all 4 options, including the consolidated with the staff savings, that 2.6 per year. Then at least we have all the information on the table, right? Because it sounds like there's some people
It's
who
starting to become-
rightfully so are very
Yeah,
sensitive
it's
to
starting
the
to get
tax bill.
really complicated.
We'll
By
have to do
themselves,
something now and then.
The parameters of 70 to 130, as I recall, were a product of that survey way back when. And that really came from, majority of respondents saying that there was comfort level between $200 to $400 increase in taxes. We've kind of backed into, what does that translate to construction costs? And right or wrong, we've kind of backed ourselves, those are our margins, and we've done our best to stay within them. But I would just note that when the taxpayer said that, there was no value proposition. They weren't seeing what they were getting. That was just like, this is what I'm willing to pay.
Right.
And so I think potentially it requires education, and I don't know if it'll be terribly successful, but I think to some, if they can understand what they're getting and why they're getting it, then they're a more informed voter. Whether that translates into a willingness to pay more, I can't say, but the question was posed to them without really any ability to react to what am I getting for that investment.
Did the referendum that failed, did that include the middle school,
It's a very small middle school project, though. It was like a $7 million middle school addition.
What did that?
Where's that? Can we go back to that one?
What, yeah.
Well, no, that was before we knew that our inflation increases, right?
That was just to
Yeah,
get.
but that's 7 is now 30.
Oh,
Oh,
that was because you were gonna, Wentworth was gonna,
all right.
Yeah.
sixth grade was gonna move out. You didn't have to add classrooms. That's what it
Exactly.
was.
We
Yeah, yeah,
were,
yeah.
it was to remove the portables at the middle school, 6th grade was
Right.
gonna go to
Bump them
Wentworth,
down,
and then it
bump
was
them
some
down. Right.
accommodation.
Totally different than this one.
To
Yeah.
middle
I'm
school.
sorry, I never came back to you.
7, 8.
Okay, I didn't want to stop the conversation because this is a little bit on a different topic. Can you remind me the timing of us deciding on deferments? Is it after we pick one of these 4? Just so we're looking at like
Next
final
Monday.
costs.
Tom asked me that on the way in here.
It's next Monday.
But yeah, we have to do it all next.
First, deferment discussions or?
Oh, that.
approach.
Yeah, I'm as undecided on that as anybody else. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say that from our perspective, we need to know what the full recommendation is end of next Monday night in order to have time to prepare the report for the school board by the end of that week. So it doesn't matter to us what order you do them in, but just to set clear expectations, we have to have all those decisions.
Well, just in
I
terms
think
of.
that's Jenna's question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The order.
I don't recall what they are off the top of my head. There was like the laminate, the granite. Some of those are probably gonna be consistent regardless of these, so we can, if we vote
can
on
vote
one,
on
we
those
can take the
tonight.
cost out.
You know, some of the small ones, I mean, I don't have a. We got a half an hour.
Seems like you'd want the, sorry, go ahead.
Do we know when the state will be coming out with, they have convened a special committee looking at the cost of school buildings?
We don't know yet. Most likely the end of the calendar year.
And then the applications that we have in for state funding?
Don't know.
Oh, yeah, we are going to be, we're supposed to be hearing about those this summer. They came and did our visits in March. That is a year-long inquiry process. There were 100 schools that they are touring across the state chain to save 4 people, so that they're ensuring, right, that that scoring is consistent from school to school. It's not different scores.
So if
I'll
we
just say that they said this summer, I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't fall or the end of the year.
and if our referendum, well, we don't have the referendum until
November.
I was thinking it was just.
I mean, I will say realistically, we are not expecting to be at the top of those lists.
Right.
Given, you know, what the list looked like last time, where we scored last time, and what we know about what schools have fallen off that list since. I will be jumping for joy if we can be on those lists, but I also tend to be a realist.
And just to clarify, everybody makes it on the list, the order to which you're on that list, and it's usually the top 10. They didn't even get that far this time around, get a project, and
Yeah.
I think you guys were in the third.
The state only
Yeah,
allocates
20%.
$160 million per year for school construction. So that's basically in today's numbers, one.
But they convened a special committee to.
They have a committee studying that right now and looking at what are some other methodologies to look at, but they have not issued their report yet.
I would anticipate at the end of this year, see that.
Joe, I would encourage you to pursue Jen's question and just to organize yourselves as a group in terms of how do we expect next week's gonna go in terms of deferments first or what have you.
I have the answer to your question. Cost was too high, 80%. I did not like the land deal, 63%. I prefer a small neighborhood school, 62%, and right below that at 59 was, I believe, that more options should be explored. So those are your numbers.
Thank you.
Well, we certainly have addressed
that part.
That's why I put it in there.
Good work.
Let's add some options real quick.
Right.
Leroy, I cut you off. You were saying something
Stole my tree.
about,
Larry.
Where's
money?
yeah, you're running for council.
I haven't said anything all these weeks. I was gonna say, it seems the middle school deferment is consistent across all of these, so I think that could wait until we have a combination of, you know, or about one of these choices done. As far as the reductions, is that the right term?
Yeah, I can summarize them in generalities. You're mostly talking about, are you going to go with full building AC or not? Are you going to, if you're doing the ad renos, are you doing increased insulation? Are you going with, and this is probably an easier one to decide, solid surface countertops or plastic laminate countertops? And that might be an easy one just to make a decision across the board. The curbs, another one, probably easy to make a decision across the board. And then we're getting into things like the middle school options. And then in each of the renovations, there is a line item regarding doing window replacement as CIP projects. flooring replacement as CIP projects at the middle school and things like that, so.
So if they, if we keep the insulation in for the,
At Renos. As in keep it in, as in keep it in the project.
yes,
Yeah.
keep it in the project, do they basically have to take the windows out and take care of the insulation and then just put the old windows back in if we defer?
We'd have to look at that a little bit closer, not always, depending on where the window is sitting in the wall. But it's a good, I understand where you're getting at, and yeah, it's a good thing to think about.
We were gonna go with one of the neighborhood school options. Do we know, like, I'm just curious, like, how would you break up those bid packages and put them out to bid? Would it all be one, or would we put them out like 3 separate?
Talking about just the small K2s.
Yeah.
We would really read the market at that time, and kind of assess what other projects are out there. When we break them, if we see that there's a lot of kind of larger contractors available, we'll keep them all together as one. If we're seeing that there's smaller contractors that have school work experience, we would break them down into the smaller packages.
Charlie? Is there value in doing a non-binding straw poll now to see whether people would like to choose the project and then talk about deferments, or the other way around?
Yep.
I have like a very strong inclination for how I would like to do it, but I'm curious.
Yeah, because I don't have an inclination at all for how I'd like to do it, so.
I feel like.
Love to
I-
bounce this.
I would like to pick the project first and then start talking about deferments, but that might be just the way my brain processes it.
I just wanna, so the maximum deferment minus the middle school, right? 1 to 1.2 is significant, but I think all the other ones totaled were less than 2 million, right?
No, because in the appendix, so I'm jumping to the appendix here, with the AC now in there, and if you were to take the AC back out, you have some of these that are up in the 3 to 4 million.
It's like 10 million altogether.
Okay.
No, 18 on this one. So if you
It
look.
depends on the option,
It
though.
depends on the option, exactly. And so you'll see in the appendix, and these would be good slides to kind of be very familiar with going into next week. This is the summary of what those option costs are, and then we talk about the total of all the deducts. And then as you go through the next slide, it will explain what is in each of those totals. So like here is the summary for Blue Point, here's the summary for Pleasant Hill. These are the same lists that you saw previously, and we've highlighted the ones that have changed here. So essentially it's again the AC, which is a big one. But this is a pretty good representation of what you're finding in the anything that's an ad reno. So it's the window replacement, the insulation, the countertops, the curbs, and cooling. And then as you get into others, they do change a little bit from one to the next. So if we look at, it's pretty similar.
So Lisa, just before we move off that, what if they were to choose to take all the deferments that are on the page, what is the total maximum deduct?
Well,
4 million?
it depends on the option. So are you, what are you asking about? So like for this one right here, Tom, if they were to take, and they're not just deferment, some of them are just deducts, so stuff taken out of the project. The total on this one is 18.3 million.
But that includes insulation.
Yeah, it does.
I'm gonna keep saying that because we live in Maine.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna add on to that, nobody learns anything when they're sweaty as can be.
Yeah, so I want to clarify.
Reason.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give the total.
Okay.
So.
The total here, and all of the things. This is why I think my brain would prefer to talk about, to choose the project and then talk about our deferments, because not all of these deferments apply to every project, and trying to keep track and be like, okay, if we choose option ABA, 8 Corners Site 2, would you be in favor of this? We might be making decisions that we don't need to be making because that option isn't really on the table. among the group anyway.
I think it'd be an easier way to organize the decisions.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
We'll get-
Chairman, you'll be able to be organized based on the 4 options that will be discussed.
Yeah, we definitely.
Deducts that will go with each of them, so you can present the package that relates.
And then we would essentially have 2 agenda items for next week. 1, vote on option, and 2, vote on deferments of that option.
I
Right.
want it to be clear, they're not all deferments.
Sorry, I keep saying deferments,
It's
but
okay.
yeah, deduct.
I just, for
deduct,
the
yeah.
public's sake, it's, some of them are defer, some of them are considerations to move to CIP or
Yeah.
deferment, some of them are just a change in scope.
Deducts is the more appropriate word, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Fix myself.
So, and this might be because I'm really uninformed. I'm just curious, like, is there a reason why we've originally included all this additional scope in this project, including last referendum too? Like, we talk about consolidated school and primary schools, and it's like we have $44 million of additional scope. So I'm just like, I guess I've been confused this entire time as like, why are we even including these in this project?
Where are you getting 44 million?
For like the middle school option, the adders for Wentworth and the middle school options.
What?
So
That
when
was the charge of the school board and the town council, was to develop a K-8 school solution. Because of, various concerns at different phase levels, so the Wentworth is directly related to changing enrollment. The middle school is related to, again, if we go back to the benchmarking, the concerns about the safety and security of the middle school that are well established. And so that was the charge of this group through the board and the council.
So if we defer those, are we like out of line that, since
So
we're
the
not meeting
only-
the charge?
just to clarify, the only deferment they're talking about is whether to build a well, on this one, on this chart right here. The middle school deferment is to have it to where you are not building space for the projected increase of students.
Yeah.
You are building space for the students that are already there, but they're in portables.
But if we were to reject like Wentworth and middle school option 1, like, we wouldn't be fulfilling the charge then necessarily.
Well, yeah, because so Wentworth would still be undersized for projected enrollments in the middle school. So essentially, if you reject option 1, you're rejecting that is rejecting the middle school project completely, right?
So what you're suggesting is a K-2 project with add alternates.
I'm not suggesting anything, I'm just.
No, but for the
confused by-
sake of
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah. I'm just confused by it, because all I hear is like consolidated school and the K3s, and it's like, we're doing all this additional work. I was just generally.
Well,
Wasn't getting rid of the portables in the charge as well?
it is.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing you'd be.
And
There's no world that exists where we could defer the Wentworth scope. Or like all of the middle school options.
I think there's
the work I think we've fulfilled the charge. Like, I think the body of work is here. I don't know that the recommendation that then goes to the board has to include that, but it's gonna be with a giant caveat that we fully acknowledge that this does not address the 3-5 enrollment issue. But this is our recommendation nonetheless, and the school board then has the body of work and they have our recommendation, and it's gonna be up to them to reconcile what they think should go forward.
And the charge does include the cost parameters, so I think
Yeah.
if cost is your
Yeah.
reason for deducting or deferring, I think it's entirely in line.
I don't think anybody's gonna take us to charge court, that's my point. I think really everyone in this room should be applauded for.
And I know you're just, for sake of argument, sake of discussion,
Sure,
I
sure.
appreciate that. But I do just want to remind the group that I feel like for about a month this fall, the middle school was the primary problem we were talking about and how we solve the middle school problem. It's not an insignificant issue that the middle school faces. So for what it's worth. Sorry, I saw a couple hands.
Yeah, so if we can just focus on Wentworth for a minute. You know, Wentworth was designed, so we are building, we've already decided that we have a contingency of, is it 3% or 5% in terms of enrollment? 3%. Wentworth was designed for 800 students. It has 40 classrooms and 22 special ed rooms. The cafeteria has capacity for 430 students. So what does, we know that, or the projection is actually, the highest projection is 890. So we know, and that will be in 2031, 32?
Correct.
And we're building a $3.2 million addition to accommodate those 90 students that are coming. And are there, I mean, can we increase class size?
We already have.
That's
So
at
it was
four-
supposed to
that's
be
at
loaded
24.
at 22. We've already loaded it to 24 to reduce the size of that addition. And we need to keep in mind, that even though it was designed a certain way, the programming has changed. And some of those spaces are used for special ed when they were originally supposed to be regular ed classrooms. So essentially that addition is 3 classrooms already planned to be loaded at 24 instead of 22. And the reason we're able to do that is because the foresight of increasing those core spaces originally, we don't have to do anything to those. So we already increased those to 24 to be able to do that.
So 40 classrooms times 24 is 960 students.
Yep, I think.
But not every classroom is a general education
Right.
classroom, right? Respectfully.
Right, so
We have allied arts classrooms, we have a robust number of special education
Right.
students. And those, take separate spaces.
well, I'm accounting for 40 regular classrooms and 22 otherwise, special rooms, whether it's allied arts or whatever. So if there's 40 regular classrooms times 24, it is 960. So is it absolutely necessary that we include this $3.2 million? I mean, my preference would be, I want some of the kind of the deductions that really don't amount to very much. I want the solid, I'm with Todd. And I'd rather see something like the 3.6, we'd like to do it, but we can't. And the one thing that I will say is that when I look at this whole project from the view of an outsider, and I ask myself, what modifications were made to keep the cost down? We got pretty much everything we want, everything.
I mean, we increased our class size, which saved us $7 million or close to $10 million in order to make that Wentworth 3.6. So I would say we've turned over many stones and made many hours of looking into this and how, and I mean, Diane's forethought into increasing our class size for that time period in order to avoid having to upgrade all of those major systems is a pretty huge savings. Like I would be hard pressed to say that we didn't look at all when we took an almost $10 million renovation and made it free.
But when I look at the two, say Pleasant Hill and Blue Point, those 2 buildings are being completely renovated. We are leaving not one space untouched. And, as just a member of the public, I would want to know, why is that? Why couldn't we save some of it?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Sue, and I actually think that we've been talking about it earlier this evening when someone asked the question, how long can we expect these buildings to last? If we're doing what we're talking about doing, which is completely, renovating them, we've heard Lisa say that longevity is going to serve us well into the future for addition renovation. we can certainly think about what you're suggesting, which is leave the existing buildings as is and add on. But again, that is a short-term Band-Aid, and the main part of each of those facilities is going to have a much shorter shelf life,
I also
right?
want to point out.
Because
that it
they're
won't hold the
reaching
program.
that right now.
It also won't hold the program. So some of these renovations are driven by getting the certain spaces to fit the program that is needed to get the number of classrooms and special education spaces and things like that. We have listed in the list of deferments and things like that, things that you can back out, like windows and other finishes. So there are things that you don't have to do and you can remove if the group so chooses.
Did we already remove flooring? No, we had that
I think we
conversation.
just talked about doing that at the middle school renovation, because the renovation and moving the walls within the existing of the K2s, you're just gonna have a patch both of flooring here and there. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I do also think it needs to be said, there has to be something done for those 90 kids at Wentworth. And so yes, we're spending 3.6 now, but at $1 million per portable with a minimum of 2 portables, that's $2 million in portables to house those 90 kids during that bubble. And so if you ask me, do you want to spend $3.6 million and invest it into the building, or do you want to spend $2 million and have portables sitting in the parking lot? I think that's a value choice, and we can try and inform voters as to why we made that choice. But it's what we're not deciding between $3.6 million and $0. And that's where I just want to be really careful. Like, I hear what you're saying, Sue, completely. Like, we are getting everything. This is fully loaded. What can we take out that would be substantial? But there are costs associated with taking some of these things out.
Lisa, did the alt 3, or I don't know, the alt V, or whatever the heck it is, the consolidated school, does that, I'm assuming, take into account like the efficiencies that we find for savings in GCs and GRs as opposed to having
GCs.
the general conditions
Yeah.
and
Yep,
does that?
it does, yep.
So it is
So there's an
less.
efficiency
Okay.
with the larger school. So when you look at the cost per square foot, and I don't remember them off the top of my head, but usually it's a lower cost per square foot for a new build of that size for the consolidated than there is for a small addition. So yeah.
I feel like I remember 12% being carried across the board. I didn't know if it was, assuming it was less than on the
No, in the
consolidated.
most recent ones, I've had them break out the difference between the GC as well as the phasing, so that we could see that difference.
Thank you.
Todd?
Regarding all the reductions in cost, I know I start to smirk when we talk about laminate countertop versus soft surface, because in the big picture, that's just one tiny piece. If you go down through the list of the life that I live every day in schools, there are so many categories where you can start nibbling away at the edges to try and reduce costs. And I wonder, and I'm not gonna judge whether it's this committee's responsibility or not, but we have this wonderful firm called Harriman, who could actually go down through that list and say, here's where you're really gonna save your money, and here's where you're not. And if you choose the lesser expensive way out now, you're gonna pay down the road, because in 10 years, it's gonna be cooked and you're gonna have to be replacing it. So maybe we consider that list with Harriman's expertise to say, you know, I don't know, I have this whole list that I just wrote here, sitting here. Here's where the big dollars are. Here's where you're gonna save for this particular project to get approved. And the rest, you could do it as a whole clump instead of picking curbing and countertops. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
It does, the big savings is square footage. I mean, unless we're making the building smaller, you're not gonna be saving a lot. It's gonna be a bunch of these little pieces put together to have overall savings, so, yeah.
So that's why I'm like, you see my facial expressions changing because I don't have a good poker face, that's why. It's like you're just taking little tiny bites. And I think Sue said that earlier, it's like we're trying to take little bites and save $500,000 in a $130 million project. It's nothing. She's looking for big savings.
So to kind of add on to what Todd said, would a better use of that exercise be, and I think we've already seen it to some extent, be going through that list and seeing what might be best recommended as part of a CIP program. Not something that we're gonna to cheap out on or, you know, invest in something that's gonna crack the bed in 10 years, but something that might be best put on a schedule that will help get us within this range. And I think we've seen that with the discussion about windows, flooring.
Yeah, we've kind of identified the big ones that are out there that jump out right away. And they're all kind of in that list. We can kind of categorize like here, these are the CIP ones. These are the ones that essentially are change in materiality.
What about roofing? Just out of curiosity.
The roofing is called for to be replaced in various areas. But we can look at it one more time.
There's only one roof. Right, it's a rubber membrane roof on, you're not gonna do anything other than that, right?
No.
Well, there's all
It
kinds
depends
of
on the
different
type.
roofing choices you can make, but some aren't as good as others, so. Yeah, you don't wanna cheap out on the most important part of your building envelope, in my opinion.
And I also want to remind folks that we're at concept.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get big picture, kind of not in the nitty gritty. There'll be time where we're gonna get into every line item of this project and say, okay, is this the right decision? Is this the right decision? Here's a value decision. When we're at concept, these are the big items that we identify. If you want to save a lot of money, it's gonna be in square footage, or it's gonna be major scope reductions, like Sue's been pointing out. Or move some of the stuff to CIP. But if we start getting too granular, we're gonna be shaving little bits off when we really need to make sure that we have the amount that we need to address the scope that's been identified.
Does it make sense maybe to group them? I don't know the right terminology for it, but by things that impact the learning environment and like insulation, and versus countertops, where I would be much more likely to say that we shouldn't take out insulation because it affects the staff and the students and maybe even the quality of the building long-term versus countertops or curbs, and try to, maybe that's another parameter around it, is how it affects the people in the school.
All right, one more, and then we gotta go to public comment. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Did your mechanical engineer ever get back on the fully custom units that he had listed in his narrative?
I have to circle back and look at that. I know he just updated all the narratives, so I need to just double check what he listed currently.
Okay. Thanks. We'll go to public comment, start in the room.
Anyone? All right, we got the raise thing. So I think, there was a lot of discussion, and I think Todd and Diane sort of talked about this.
Matt.
Yeah.
Just come up to the mic, please.
Oh.
Oh, perfect. Todd and Diane kind of touched on my thought of this, that 100 to 130 million equates to $200 to $400 per tax impact, right? That's the charge, $200 to $400 is what it scaled up to. So quickly, I did hundreds of dollars per millions of dollars, same as you do dollars per square foot. 160 million equates, if it's an average of $400 tax impact for a $130 million project, it equals $492.31 for a $160 million consolidated school. So if you take out the $190 in staffing savings, you're at $302 average over 30 years, quickly. doing the math, not without all the nuanced things that Tom goes through, but my quick math says it's $300 for a $162 million school when you add the two buckets of money together. So that was just kind of one of my thoughts. Another thought, when we moved here in 1987, population was like 11,000. I had 30 kids in the second grade at Pleasant Hill School. And by the time I graduated in 2002, we had like 150 in my class. I think another class 4 years ahead of me had like 120.
I graduated 118, I think.
Yeah. But the class of 2007, 5 years later, had like 240 kids in it. It was astronomical, and then it trickled back down a little bit. So these fluctuations still happen. At that time, it was 17,000 in population. Now we're at what, 20, almost 24,000. So, you know, the projections are just that, projections, but if the history of the population of the town and the amount of students in the school system has increased, regardless of what we can estimate. So to defer a second story on the middle school, I think is kind of silly, because it's pretty clear that there is an increasing enrollment over a period of 20 to 30 years, especially if you're looking at a 20-year lifespan of your mechanical pieces to this school or what have you, a 60-year building. So that, I mean, that's just kind of one thing that I was looking at. And the other thing I was looking at is, I think it'd be pretty easy to put a value of some kind, whether it's low or not, on a school building, as any other office or commercial building would be. You know, it's $200 a square foot. It's the average going out there of an unfinished building that's gonna be made over into whatever it needs to be, whether it's a doctor's office or a daycare or whatever. I mean, that should be pretty easy to put a value on the three buildings that are there. So it's I think there's a lot of merit in the fact that this consolidated option adds more value and will ultimately be less expensive than the neighborhood options. That is all.
Thanks, Matt. We'll go online to Marvin, Mr. Gates.
Hi, good evening. Very nice being here. Great discussion. As a member of the public, I'm attempting to speak to a part of the conversation tonight when the dollar figures were in the $150 million range. And as the gentleman who just spoke said, there's and the conversation about value and property, but having to do again with a price to referendum above what the charge has been, the $130 million. I'm speaking to that possibility. And I'm reminded of the election in 2023 and being in the gymnasium on election night with Jillian and April, and Shannon was there, who I saw at the school board workshop last Thursday. And I think it was just basically the four of us. I have to confess, I was on the side of the majority that night. And I know these three fine ladies were on the other side, because I remember all of us being, I don't know, not dumbfounded, I'm not sure what the word is, by the size of the majority. So I'm just speaking to the reality of election night and what the public said, and to never, ever, ever take your mind off of that when you think of all these very good options, particularly when they start rising in price. The goal is to have this pass this November. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Marvin. Appreciate that. All right, if there's no other Public comment, yeah?
I just want to remind everyone, we have a big town vote tomorrow. We have a
Yes.
town council spot that needs to be filled, a school board spot that needs to be filled, as well as the school budget is up. Yeah, sorry, there's 3 school board members. So yeah, please go out and vote. Do you want to collect these? Please
Yeah.
give me your, or give
If
one
you
of
have
us.
the cheat sheet, please turn it in. Matt, avert your eyes. If there's no objection, we'll adjourn, how do I say it right?
Motion to adjourn.
Wait.
Without objection.
We will, without objection, we will adjourn.
And then Ron.
Thank you.
We can leave that.